Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 613 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme is Respond, Don't React. Our quote of the day comes to us from Raji Lukur. Respond, don't react. Listen, don't talk. Think, don't assume. Before we jump into today's episode, I would like to encourage our listeners to please subscribe to our show and leave us a review. If you have already done so, we truly appreciate that, and you. Thank you. I met today's guest on Instagram a few weeks ago when I saw he had just released his first book. I purchased a copy, and I'm glad that I did. I think you are going to really enjoy hearing from Andrew Wingreen, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Andrew, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you taking the time. First question we ask each guest is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Man, of course. I think, I love, following your account, following your podcast. Even when you sent me emails, you're always exuding that positive energy. And I think as leaders, as coaches, entrepreneurs, I think that's a huge deal for us. And I think being conscious of the impact we have on people and just the small mundane things, like you said, if we can just impact one person every day through the energy we bring in the room, I think that's a huge deal and that's a win for us. So yeah, I'm hoping that this podcast will make an impact and cheer someone up today.
I appreciate you touching on that. I think I've shared this one other time, but you and I were just talking offline, and I was a varsity head high school coach for a couple of years, and where I coached, we had two really big courts, and there was one huge divider that was basically like that thin. It's just, really strong plastic. And I was walking around for practice, and I heard one of the kids on the team was talking to another player, and I caught the last part of that quick conversation, and he said, I really hope Coach motivates us today. And I just, being a young head coach, there's a lot of different thoughts that go in your mind. The first thing I wanted to, kind of hit him back with is like, if you're not motivated, if you don't want to be here, like that Bobby Knight, go home. But obviously wasn't the time or place for that. But I realized in life, we never know unless we hear it or see it, in someone's face or maybe their demeanor, what somebody's going through. And to your comment, that little bit of encouragement, that positive attitude can make a huge difference. And as you know, being a coach yourself, it doesn't take any talent, doesn't take any skill. You don't have to be number one, the best player of the team. You could be the last player on the bench, but it's so important to value just energy, attitude, and not only what it does for you, but what it can do for a team, company, family, organization.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think with motivation, obviously it is our job as coaches to sometimes, provide that motivation. Obviously, the older we get, the more mature we get, we understand that motivation, comes and goes, it fades some days, but our job as coaches is to also teach these kids, hey, you don't need someone else to motivate you. Like, yeah, we all need it sometimes, but then, hey, how can I take that? I can motivate you today, but now how can I help you, set a foundation and create something within yourself that allows you not only to do that for you, but now you can be that person, leaders making leaders, right? And I think that's a powerful thing we can keep in mind as we go attack the day.
One of the things I love about that concept too is you don't need a title, right? So you don't need to be a manager, a boss. You don't need to be a head coach. You could be literally, somebody in the marketing team, and it's your second week and you just walk in and, have a smile, say good morning. So I appreciate you giving your spin on that. The first question we ask each guest is for their no quit story. And that's a time, either personally or professionally, you could have given in or given up, but you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I have countless stories we could probably go into with this, but I think, for me, just going in the coaching journey, right? College coaching, I think everyone turns their TV on, they see it. It's something that there's a lot of people who want to do it, but it's hard. It's hard to get your foot in the door. It's hard to keep positions, right? I mean, everything's based on wins and losses, especially the higher levels you get. And so I think for me, there were several times where I look at myself and I'm like, is this worth it? Right. I have a wife, I have two little kids at home, the time commitment, the day by day. And, there's a lot of obstacles and a lot of adversity that comes with, the job. And it could be related to basketball, it could be related to recruiting, it could be related to just stuff I have going on in my family, but I also have to do all the stuff with basketball. And I think this, relates to a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and really anybody in the real world. But there's several times where I was like, man, God, please just give me something else to do besides coaching. Because there's a few years where I didn't want to do it. And for me, not having a playing resume in college and, not winning championships in college, sometimes it was harder for me to get my foot in the door. But I think, you always hear about chipping away and like you just keep going that one more day, one more rep. And I've seen that countless times where, you just kind of lock in and you get through the hard times, you get through the adversity. And what waits on the other side of that is amazing. And it's not always that it's what you were hoping for, what you thought it would be, but you look back and you're like, man, okay, for me, I'm a man of faith, and so I'm just like, God put me in these situations, and He allowed me to persevere and overcome this adversity because of this. And then you see the reasons and the purpose behind it, and I think that's powerful. So, when I hear people wanting to quit, it's like, nah, just hang on for a little bit longer. Just keep striving for that next thing, because you're going to be able to look back at that and realize how powerful those moments were. And it's an avenue to impact so many other people through your story. So, yeah, that's kind of just one broad one for me, but yeah, I love that idea of no quit.
I appreciate you giving your perspective on that. It reminds me of a couple years ago. I was preparing for a pretty large speaking event in New York City, and as being a coach yourself, you're speaking every day to your team, your staff. You prepare certain things. So, being one of my largest ones, I prepared, and I think it was on a Saturday morning, the event was, and it was, I think, Thursday afternoon. I was watching a video of Jocko Willink, and he talked about just don't quit today. And I think it was like a 5 or 6 minute video, but basically the gist of it was you don't need to make a commitment today forever. You're not signing a 30-year mortgage. But in essence, he was suggesting to the audience that they sign a contract not to quit today. And just the way he said it, I completely changed the ending of my speech, which added stress. But it's something that I think is so important. And you said it best, you being a coach, if someone's listening to this as a student athlete, a parent, an entrepreneur, whatever their lane is per se, we all have those struggles and challenges every single day. And you use the word, I think you mentioned real life. And real life comes at us every single day, different colors, different shapes, different sizes, good, bad, medium, small, large. And it's just making that commitment to say, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get through today. And I think a lot of times we look at the end result and realize that the end result is not today, it's not tomorrow, which leads me into my first question for you. And I want to first off, for our listeners, if you have not gotten a chance to check out Andrew's new book, I'm holding it up right now. Whoever is listening to this, Win 1-1. Congratulations on writing your first book. On page 16, you wrote, you don't win everything once. You win the moment in front of you, and then the next, and then the next. I have to ask you to expand on that, because I want to be clear as I preface this, the simplicity of that, and I mean that with huge respect. It's such a simple concept, but it's not simple to do.
Yeah, 100%. I think as I was writing that book, that was kind of the thought in my mind about almost everything I was writing is like, this is so simple. This is stuff that people have heard, but I think there's so much more depth behind it, and, really trying to embrace those things. But, with that quote you just read, I think, you talked about that contract and, hey, we're not going to give up today. We're not going to quit today. Well, I found, at least in my life, and I've seen it in so many other, players I've coached or coaches I've been around, like it's sometimes easy to make those agreements or sign up to do that for a day or for a week. And it's hard to carry that consistency on over time. And so I think we have to have those conversations with ourselves, like you said, every single day. And that's why the subtitle of my book was Win Every Moment, One Day at a Time, because it's a perseverance and a resilience that we have to develop. I think we can have these small wins, but as you stack those wins and as you have consistency in whatever you're doing, you get better and you develop those calluses, right? Just like on your fingers when you're playing the guitar, or the guys on the roof, doing laying shingles. Like, you develop calluses, and it hurts at first. It's hard to do at first, but the more you do it, the more you get used to it, the more you find out what works and what doesn't work. It just kind of becomes second nature. And so I think that idea of, yeah, like, win the moment right in front of you, but you have to keep doing that. And the only way to keep doing it is by locking in that moment. There's another quote I put in there where it says, in order to win the moment, you have to be in the moment. And I think that's, like you said, we get so focused on the outcome or where we want to be, like the end result. And if that's where our mind's always at, like, sometimes we forget to be in the moment, but the moment is where you develop this consistency and these calluses that are going to allow, your mindset to really sustain where you need to go.
I love that concept, and to me, it could be sports, business, with a spouse, a significant other, as a parent, grandparent. It's win that moment, right? It's win that second, that play. But on the flip side of it, and this is something that I try to get across, and I want to get your 2 cents on this, with any sport, if you stay in that past moment too long, so let's use basketball. So you missed a shot, the last possession. Now you're transitioning to defense, and you need to guard either your defender, or if you're playing zone, you need to guard your area. And it's impossible to give your best if in the back of your mind you're thinking about, oh man, I should have missed that. Was my elbow in? Was I ready for it? And then you transition back to offense, and as the ball's going around, you're about to catch it and you're open. If you're thinking about, I missed the last time, don't miss this time, there's a good chance I'm going to miss. My point to that is, it's so important to not forget the moment the prior moment, in the sense of, like, who cares? It doesn't mean anything, because a lot of times those little moments do add up. But it's being able to say, I can't change that missed shot, that turnover, not getting that sale on that sales call, but I can impact this moment. And I think so many times we all think about the past, and too much that it impacts where we are right here in the present moment.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, yeah, those when we make mistakes, right? Like you referenced the basketball game. When you make a mistake, it's important. Like we have to fix those. We have to learn from those. But sometimes the game moves so fast and life moves so fast, and whatever we're doing, it moves fast. And so, like you said, emotionally, I think, yeah, we're going to react to things, good and bad, right? Our successes, we're going to react to them. Our mistakes, we're going to react to them. I think that's the way God made us. I think that's the way we're wired. But it's one thing to react, it's another thing to, like you said, stay stuck in that. And that's why I think it's so important for us. Just like we get reps in, getting shots up, we practice sales calls, you get reps in doing things the right way. We have to do the same thing with our minds and mentally. And you make a mistake in the game, yeah, react to it, but then we have to reset, and there is an intentional response that needs to take place. And I think that's where, you know oftentimes good leads to great, or bad leads to good. And it's that moment of reset and response that is so powerful. And like you said, it's we can stay stuck there for 3, 4, 5 plays later, and oftentimes the bad compounds, right? Like, we're going to make mistake after mistake after mistake because we can't focus on what we need to focus on. But if we can reset and respond, which again is, it takes work, it takes intentionality, it takes us understanding that stuff's going to happen and I have to learn how to move on from it. But when we can do that, just like anything, you get the reps in, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And that's not saying it's ever just a second nature of like, okay, this is, I'm never going to lose my cool, or I'm never going to just react and fail to move on. But you start realizing, oh, like, if I want to be successful, I have to respond. I have to get past this. And oftentimes we refer to this with mistakes, right? But it's also a success. Like how many times do you see teams get, they go on a 8 game winning streak and it's like, we got this. I don't need to go, I don't need to do the next best thing. No, like it's moment after moment. And so you got to respond from past failures and past success.
I could not agree more with that. And one of the things I've found as a mental performance coach is when you have those 2, 3, 5, 6 game win streaks, a lot of times teams and coaches will go away from some of that mental work, that preparation, because they're quote unquote playing well. But I forget who said it. I had a phenomenal conversation with Josh Pastner, the new head coach of UNLV, a couple weeks ago. And I think offline he was saying that that's when you double down on those things that you can control. And what I define what you can't control is the mental reps, the mental prep. And I think it's natural almost when you're playing well. I don't want to say to take your foot off the gas, but it could be in any part of life. You could be in sales, you could be doing things well with your spouse, significant other. And as things are going well, it's kind of that natural inclination to say, okay, I'm doing well, let me just ease off a little bit. Now, it doesn't mean on the other side that you put your foot down, on the gas all the time. And I jokingly use the analogy of a race car. You can't put your foot all the way down on the gas and go around the track hundreds of times and get, fill up on gas and take a break, because you're going to end up obviously crashing into probably everybody. But there's times when you need to take your foot off the gas for a little bit and, to use your point, reset. And I loved how you said response and reset, because the reaction for me, and this is something that I try to coach and teach, is when you react, it's usually an emotional decision. So if you foul me hard, let's say basketball, a reaction is I turn around and I push you back right away. Now that might lead to a technical foul. The refs might let it go. Regardless, is you might know that, okay, he broke his cool, and that might impact me for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 possessions, or my coach might sub me out just like that. But when you take a second and you respond, and I always say you got to just take 2 seconds to reset. Could be a couple deep breaths, could be, when the ball is being taken out of bounds, but it's so important to have that reset moment where you may make sure that you are responding, which I feel is in a place of power, as opposed to reacting, which is not in a place of power.
Yeah. And I think there's so much power in like be there before you get there, right? Like how many times you go, maybe you went on a vacation several years ago, you go back to that same spot and it's like second nature. You know where to go. Like even though you haven't been there, you haven't spent a ton of time, but you saw it before. You maybe went to the restaurant and like how to get there next time you go 10 years later. But the same thing happens, right? I get fouled hard. We talk to our guys all the time about like what could happen. Like let's be there before we get there. What happens when I get fouled hard and a dude shoves me? What happens when I miss a shot and then I go turn the ball over on the next possession, 2 plays in a row? Like we talk through that because I think it's powerful and it's important to know, hey, when this happens, I have to see it. I have to know how I'm going to respond, because like you said, we're all going to react. Like you are going to have a reaction. It's not like something you can avoid. But what you can control now is how you reset and respond. And so I oftentimes just try and bring our team, bring our players, myself as a coach, like what am I going to do when the ref messes up a call? Because as we all know, they are going to mess up a call. So like, how am I going to respond to that? Right. And I have to train myself like to know what to do. So when that moment actually happens, I've been there. Even if I never actually experienced it, I experienced it in my mind and I visualized it. And that idea to me of be there before you get there really helps in those situations.
And I think to your point is you just said something that's really powerful, is it goes to the idea of preparation, which obviously we've touched on a bit, and you use the word reps a lot, is you said you talk it through with your team. And that's something that people say, well, are you preparing for, the worst? And I always say, no. I said, you never have a 2-hour practice and say, okay, let's now talk about every single bad thing that could happen, but let's talk through where, we're down 1 or tie game and, we turn the ball over, right? It's not preparing or planning or hoping for the worst, but what it does is if and when it does happen, you're prepared. And I've talked about this quite a bit on my show, Michael Phelps had a phenomenal coach, Bob Bauman, for I think his entire professional career, as well as all the Olympics. And he always talked to Michael about go to the videotape. And what he would do is he would visualize the good, the bad, the unfortunate. So if and when it did happen, and I forget which Olympics, but his goggles filled up with water and he didn't flip out. He just knew exactly the strokes and he ended up winning the race. And the reality is his goggles only filled up with water, let's say 10, 12% of the time, but he had prepared for it. So if and when it did happen, he didn't flip out. Now, I'm not saying, and I know you're not saying or suggesting that you go through every single bad thing, but we know as coaches, as mentors, what are the higher chances and probability of certain things going to happen? And basketball is a perfect example for all walks of life, right? You can have a bad day. Weather's going to be, not what you want. There's going to be traffic. It's always going to impact certain things. But going back to what we talked about, if you respond versus react, I think it makes that situation just a little bit better. Now, I want to preface, I'm not in any way saying you just respond and everything works out, but it's like having a positive attitude or a negative attitude. And Zig Ziglar used to always say, positive attitude won't ever guarantee success all the time, but it's always going to guarantee a higher chance than if you had a negative attitude.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it is amazing when you start thinking about just the way you approach every situation. That's really kind of the theme of my whole book is the winner's approach, like how we show up, and that those thoughts that you give yourself, the way that you talk to yourself, and the way that you show up, it really leads to everything else that you do. Like it's the foundation. And so without that mentality of showing up the right way, a lot of other things can go awry.
As somebody who's not only read your book, but we write in similar styles of parables, fables, I think we all take as authors different people. I know for my book, and I'm assuming it's the same from you, is you had, coach, a mentor, a teacher, a parent, uncle, a friend that kind of play different roles, whether specifically written after them or things they said or things you experienced, which leads me to a question that I knew I was going to ask you is if you ink what you think, you recall these lessons 10 times better. That to me is so powerful. And if I could paraphrase them in my words and really want you to expand on this, but I always find it interesting to see people that are writing things down, whether you're a 55-year-old unbelievably successful CEO or you're a 21-year-old assistant college coach. I have found when you write things down, and it's not in any way a knock on someone's intelligence level, but when you write it down, whether it's a pad, notebook, just on practice sheets, your ability to not only remember it, but recall it later is so much higher. So I'm glad you wrote that. And I have to ask you just to expand from your point of view on that.
Yeah, I think, for me growing up, not really growing up, but when I started wanting to get into coaching, so, maybe through my high school years, I started reading a lot of John Wooden books. And I would do a lot of research and just try and watch videos, hear stories about John Wooden. And every time somebody opened their mouth about Coach Wooden or you read something, I mean, he was all about books. He was all about writing. And anytime he was at a coaching clinic or he was at church or, he was just in a meeting with somebody, every single person said he would take notes. And it wasn't just like a one or two lines. It was like pages of notes. And that just always struck me that like if this guy who is maybe the best basketball coach to ever live, has the most success, the most championships, if he can still, even after he has retired from coaching and he's still doing these kind of things, like maybe that's something I should be doing. And so, for me, I'm definitely not the best note taker. I try to do it as much as I can. Like I'm not nearly as good as a John Wooden would have been. I don't always have a notebook with me, but anytime I can, I try to ink what I think and I write things down. And whether it's a podcast I'm listening to or a sermon I'm attending or, in a meeting with our coworkers or my staff, like, you try and put that on paper. And like you said, there's multiple ways of learning going on. Like, yeah, you're writing things, you're having to think a certain way, you're visually seeing things, and it just kind of hits your different senses. And to me, I've seen that be very powerful. And then I even kind of took it to the next level several years ago where I would start drawing, like when I would do journal entries, like if there was a quote or a thought or like a verse, a song, whatever, I would try and draw a picture on that one thought. And like again, it like ingrains it into your mind. And when you're seeing it and you're thinking on it for longer periods of time, not only does it stick with you longer, but you're able to kind of get more depth behind it. So yeah, I think it is powerful, and I would encourage anybody, any young leader, any player, any entrepreneur out there, like just write down your thoughts, even if it doesn't seem like it's significant. I can't even count how many times I've had thoughts I didn't write them down, and I'm like, dang it, like I wish I could go figure out what I was thinking that in that moment because 2 days later, I feel like it could be something, but I forgot what it was.
I really am glad you shared that. And I don't know if I've ever shared this story on the podcast, and we're well over 600 episodes now, but it was early on in my financial career. I had a meeting with a mortgage broker that I was doing some networking with. We both had pretty good networks, and we were just meeting for, I think, the first time. And it was kind of near the end of the meeting, and he took out a notebook and he basically started taking some notes on things. And at one point, he was very specific with being intentional. And I asked him, his name was John. I said, John, I got to ask you, why'd you take it? And he said, Chris, he said, my father, unfortunately, has been involved in a lot of lawsuits. So right off the bat, I was kind of like, oh, man. And he said, no, he said, let me be clear. He said, my dad takes notes all over the time. He said he wasn't involved in them, but his notebooks were actually taken and people use them because he writes who was at the meeting, where was the meeting. But I just remember the idea of writing it down, and then he and I continued to have conversations, and we still know each other to this day. But it was something so simple as he wanted to know what the next steps were, his call to action, my call to action, as opposed to what I think a lot of people do. And at the time, I would then, whenever I finished a meeting, I would, whether it was 5 minutes or an hour later, I'd take out a pen and try to remember. And I think I did a pretty good job, as we all do, but nobody's memory, especially in today's day and age with technology and cell phones, to be able to go back. But I'm so glad you shared your perspective, because it's so powerful just to take a couple minutes. And one thing that I get asked, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, is because I take a lot of notes, people always say, oh, well, I don't know how to, or, I don't take notes as well as you do. And I always laugh, because if you look at notebooks from years ago, I think my first probably 5-10 years of taking notes, I looked like a second grader, just scribbles, there was no rhyme or reason. Now, many, many years later, I think I'm better at it, but it's about just being consistent with. And one of the things I always suggest, and I want to get your specific feedback on this, is just to start, and don't start with, okay, I need to write a book, but start with the idea of, I just want to be able to remember 2 or 3 things from this meeting or this conversation, as opposed to having to rely on my memory a week, a month, 6 months later.
Yeah, I think just, the things that stand out to you, right? And I feel like that was me as an author and even as a note taker. Like I feel like I gotta sometimes solve all the world's problems, or I can't miss anything, because if I miss anything, it's pointless that I just took these notes. Like, no, like sometimes some days are better than others, right? Like I noticed this in church yesterday, right? I'm listening and I'm probably not as engaged as I should be, but like the 1 or 2 things that really stand out to me, like I can focus on those now. I don't have to have everything. Now, the more you can get, the better. But sometimes it is just 1 or 2 thoughts that you can gain from something. And I think you said that word consistency earlier, and that to me is everything. Like consistency in whatever we do, note taking, practice, business. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the things figured out, but consistency is a superpower. And the people who figure out how to be consistent and just do things every day, they don't quit, right? That in itself can get you further than, perfecting something or doing something extraordinary for just a little bit of time. So, yeah, just be consistent and do what you can.
Consistency is a superpower. I have never heard that prefaced that way. So, not that I have not already enjoyed this conversation greatly, but listeners, if you don't take anything from what Andrew said, which I know you'll take a bunch, That to me just hits me square between the eyes because most superpowers are things that you and I could never get just like that. We can't learn how to fly. We can't learn, how to be Michael Jordan just because we want to. But every single person that's listening to this podcast right now, you can become better, proficient, and eventually excellent in consistency if you really and truly want to. And the reason I say that, I want to get your thought on this as well, is because it does not require any talent or extra talent over other people to be consistent.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like it's kind of the heartbeat of my Win One One book. I talked about that winner's approach, and when I say the winner's approach, that's how we show up with our attitude, our effort, our energy. Those are all things that are pretty much in our control all the time, and they don't take a lot of talent, if any, and everybody can do that. But again, it goes down to, can I do those today? Yeah. Can I do that for a week? Sure. Can I do it for one season? Yeah, maybe. But consistency, right? Can I show up every day consistently and bring that every single day that I come to work? And when I have a bad day or a bad week, okay, we talked about that response. How can I respond and get back to it? But consistency, like all these things, it's an umbrella and they all kind of work hand in hand. But like you said, it's all things within our control. They're all things that anybody can do. You don't have to be, like you said, LeBron James or Michael Jordan. Like anybody can execute in these ways, and the only thing it takes is having that mindset of, okay, I got to go do it again. And if I don't, like, don't put pressure on yourself to be like, oh, if I mess up, I suck. No, like, just go do it again. Like, just get up, keep getting up, and go do it again. And to me, that's powerful. That consistency is so powerful.
And it's not perfection. I think that's something that we all, or at least, excuse me, let me take a step back. That's something that I struggled with as a former college athlete and coach now is, yes, you can want to be perfect. You can want to have a perfect practice, a perfect game, whatever it is. But when you don't have a perfect practice or you don't play perfect in that drill, it's that mental focus on consistency, not perfection, and goes back to something we touched about quite a bit, which is it's not reacting, it's responding, preparing for the next opportunity. It's, yes, this wasn't a good drill, or I didn't do well in that practice today. As you're maybe reflecting that evening, it's, I'm not going to allow this one poor practice to turn into two or three or four, knowing that my focus is on consistency, not perfection.
Yeah, and perfection it's a dangerous place to go. Like, yeah, we all want to strive for it, but again, I go back to John Wooden, and he would always tell his teams that the doer makes mistakes. So if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. So again, it kind of goes with that understanding of like, hey, I'm gonna give everything I have. The mistakes are probably gonna happen, but that's okay because he would always say the team that makes the most mistakes is probably gonna win. And that wasn't talking about the game, right? Like not in the game, but like in practice, like when you're working on your stuff, like push yourself to the limit. Set the expectations really high and push yourself to it, and understand. Yeah, we want to try and get perfect, but we're probably never going to attain it. And if we're doing it and we're pushing ourselves, you're going to make mistakes. And then again, by the time the game happens, you're probably going to be in a better position. And so, yeah, we can't be afraid of mistakes. We can't just assume or expect perfection. But understanding that it is in that process and in the actual doing that the amazing stuff happens.
Could not agree more. Going to change lanes here for a second. I know you are familiar with the Jim Rohn quote. You are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. If I could grant you dinner tonight with any five people, dead or alive, that you could level up from, who would you pick as your five?
Man, I know for me, I would love to have dinner with Jesus. I'm like I said, a man of faith, and I've been watching the Chosen series, and I'm on that last season where they're at the Last Supper, and it's just like it's crazy the things that were going on back then. But just knowing, what Jesus did for me, I would want to be a part of that and just be able to hear from him of how much he loves us and how much he cares for us. So definitely, he would be one. I think John Wooden would be another one. I've heard so many, of my coaching friends, especially some of the older guys who I've been lucky enough to be a part of, that tell stories about when they got to have a meeting with John Wooden or have dinner with him, or they got to just talk to him for a brief second. And it's just so impactful. So I know, the impact he's had on my life just through his books and interviews. I would love to have dinner with him. And then I'd probably have some fun too. Maybe Michael Jordan's my favorite player of all time. He is the greatest of all time. So if we need to, get any debates going on your podcast, we can take all the smoke with that. But definitely Michael Jordan, big Tiger Woods fan. I think it would be fun to just pick his brain on the mentality that he brought and just how he attacked the game and everything he did. Man, that's 4, 5. Who would my fifth one be? Probably Walt Disney. I'm gonna say Walt Disney because that's kind of another side of me. I've always had this creative side and just kind of this, you talked about never quitting. He would always talk stick to itivity, right? Like I just have to stick to it, like through the good and the bad. And this is a guy who had to overcome so much failure in his life. And I actually put one of his quotes in my book about if you can dream it, you can do it. And so that'd be my 5 right there.
My listeners know where I stand on that argument. So you and I sit on the same side. So it will be a very simple argument. So you cannot answer this question with your book, but as a lot of my listeners are readers as well, wanted to ask if there's something else that you're currently reading or perhaps you've recently read that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, so there's probably 2 books I would say. One of them is one I've read several times, and it's a book called In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day, and it's by Mark Batterson, who actually endorsed my book, and he's on the front cover, which he has a lot of good books. So I would say anything from Mark Batterson, but In a Pit is just it's an awesome story. Obviously, it's a real story from the Bible, and then just how we attack opportunity, how we just go after every day, every moment is super powerful. And I've read that book several times, and it's one I've recently reread. So that one, and then another book, I think you may know him too, but John Olinger, Worthy Wins. It's a guy who I've just recently gotten to know, and he's doing some really cool things with Unitas and Jonathan Isaac right now with his new brand, but used to be at Nike for a long time, and just kind of wrote about his story and things he had to overcome. But I think that idea of worthy wins, like what's really important in our life is so powerful. And so those are 2 recent books that I've come across that I would say I highly recommend people to go check out.
2 phenomenal authors. And I just had John on here a while back, and Mark Batterson's been a guest as well. So for our listeners who want to connect with you, follow you, find out more about you as well as your book, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so I love social media. So if anyone wants to follow me, my handle's Coach Wingreen, and that's Twitter or X, Instagram, and if you want to follow me on Facebook, but at Coach Wingreen. And then if you want to check the book out, it is available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I also have a website, www.coachwingreen.com, where I do like keynote speaking and do some training. So if anyone has a business or anything that they want to bring someone in, would love to kind of go through that win-1-1 framework and just talk through more in depth of, how it can really help your company, help your people, help your team, and just get us to keep focusing, winning that moment one day at a time.
I love that. And last question we have for you is the same question we ask everybody, is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, I think, I love that idea of no quit. I think just this podcast resonates what we have to do in life, and understanding that, tough things are going to happen. We're going to face adversity. We're going to face, hardships. But if we don't quit, I think a lot of good things can happen. And as I've been doing, some book signings, people who have asked for it, one verse I've put on there is Proverbs 16:9, which talks about, a man plans his ways, but God establishes his steps. And, through the good, through the bad, understand that it's all part of a bigger purpose and a bigger plan. And we just got to keep striving one day at a time. And I think if we can do that, like Win-1-1 says, win every moment one day at a time. And if we do that, we'll look back and have won. So that's what I would encourage people with today.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you being on here. For our listeners that are listening to it, obviously you can't see it, but I'm holding up his new book, Win-1-1. You can obviously get that wherever books are sold. But Andrew, I appreciate you being on here, and I enjoyed our conversation, and I know that we'll connect again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was awesome talking with you and appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to episode number 613. I enjoyed my conversation with Andrew, and I'm sure you received just as much value from it as I did. One thing that Andrew said on the show really hit me, and I wanted to repeat it as we wrap up today's episode. Andrew said that consistency is a superpower, and I thought that was both incredibly powerful and very insightful. My challenge to you today is just that. Whatever it is you want to achieve, improve, or attempt, focus on being consistent. Make consistency your superpower. And as you go out and crush your day today, remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.